Today, on Energy Contact, old mystics lived long, happy, healthy lives in a very hostile environment because they understood distance, space, not too close and not too far. So, the road to perfect health involves an understanding of the terrain, literally and figuratively. Today, we're about to map out the uncharted geography of all that. It's all about to unfold right now on Energy Contact.
I'm gonna drive away all these doubts I've been keeping, and I'll keep my mind on better things. He ain't gonna worry, and I ain't gonna complain. I'm gonna drive away all these doubts I've been keeping, and I'll keep my mind on better things. Just keep my mind on better things.
Hello, and welcome to Energy Contact. My name is Joseph Willenbrink. Thank you for joining me today, and thank you to the production staff here in the studio for helping me get my message out to you. Energy Contact is a series I'm presenting as a public service. It's about attaining perfect health, growth, self-improvement, happiness, and realizing your full potential. It's designed to present you a new way of seeing yourself and a new way of seeing the world around you. We're talking about things that have to do with making an energetic contact. Energetic contact with yourself internally and with the environment. There's no difference between the body, the mind, the spirit, the emotion, the intellect, the ego. There's no difference between mass and energy. These things are all the same. We love to categorize and classify them, put them into neat little categories, neat little separate sections. But in fact, all that health and growth we're talking about take place when we do just the opposite. It happens when we put these things together, when we make an energetic contact between the physical world and the unseen one. We're presenting on these programs a brand new paradigm that's thousands of years old. We're presenting extraordinary topics for ordinary people. And let's move forward with that. Let's bring up our slide. Everyone please understand that I am not a doctor. I don't want to be one. This show is not a medical show. It's not a medical talk show. It's not a medical advice show. Not a medical anything show. We don't do that. Now, I might call myself an energy healer or a chakra healer, things like that. So might you if you came to me. So might a lot of people. But state, federal, and local governments call me no such thing at all. It's very important to know that. There's a lot of important information on your screen right now. Please read that with your full attention, if you will. And when you've got it down, now would be a great time to locate a pencil and paper. And here's why you want to do that. At the end of the show, we're going to run some credits. And when those credits roll, there's going to be contact information for me. Now, I invite and encourage you to contact me. I'm kind of hoping that something I'll have to say to you today will inspire you to want to contact me. But in order to do that, you're going to need that contact information, and in order to get that, you're going to need a pencil and paper. There will be plenty of time to jot all that down when the credits roll, if your pencil and paper are ready. So please get those now. All right, let's come back up here. Today's show is show number 59. And if you're tuning in for the first time today, well, thanks. Thanks and welcome. These shows are sequential. They build, they're additive. So we're talking about things today that we've presented and explained on previous programs. There's some ramp up things, some up to speed things you will have missed out on. However, I'm doing my very best to make all of these shows have value on a standalone basis. And I believe you will get a lot out of today's show all by itself. If, however, what you see today piques your interest and it's one of the first times you've tuned in, well, please look around because there will be earlier shows airing at later times. They'll either be airing right here on this channel, re-airing, or they'll be on at different days and times in different areas. And I'll appreciate you looking around for them. All right, now it's the time of the show where I get to introduce my co-host. Let's get Slim on camera. This is my buddy Slim, and he is here for a reason. Since we're investigating what it is that energy contacts in the physical self, well, we have to know a few things, don't we? We've got a few tasks ahead of us. We have to understand something about energy, and this show is all about energy. We're going to learn all about it. But all of that energy out there somewhere does us no good whatsoever. There's energy all over the place. It does us no good until we bring it into contact with something. My buddy Slim is here to help us understand that thing that the energy contacts. Remember, a body without energy is just a corpse. And energy without a body, well, might be a number of cool things, but none of them are human. All right, let's move forward. Previously on Energy Contact, we have been looking at the invisible flow of mystical energy through the physical self. We've been looking at things like chi and prana, but they're things that are just like love, peace, goodness, anger, fear, frustration, happiness, joy, things that we cannot see, things that a surgeon can cut you open and look for all day long and won't find. But we know they're there. When we were kids, we were taught that our bodies were these individual, discrete hunks of mass, that we were different from each other, certainly. But the story gets worse than that. We were taught that we were a body separate from our own mind, separate from our own spirit, separate from our own emotion, mass separate from energy, irreconcilable, never to meet up. What a terrible lie that was. But on Energy Contact, you've experienced yourself in a different and in a far more accurate way. The way Einstein saw you, as frequencies and vibrations, as energetic forces and energy flows, invisible things that build themselves into your physical structure. In fact, it is very difficult, if not absolutely impossible, to be a spiritual person, or a healthy person for that matter, until and unless you promote the flow of invisible energy through your physical structure. So we've seen that mastering all these flows has something to do with the things to which we are attracted and the things from which we're repulsed. Those old yogis called these things ragadveshas. If we flow, things go great. And if we resist flow, we experience pain. Pain, which we have seen, is really nothing but resistance to flow. And things that flow along paths. So we've looked at a lot of these paths through which the energy travels. We've seen acupuncture meridians and reflexology points, energy starting at one place, going to another place via pipelines, via channels, vertical channels. We saw our spine. We saw how it's like the caduceus, that medical symbol with the snakes on it, how it's like the sushumna nadi, how it's like a distillation column. And they're all sort of doing the same thing. And we saw horizontal structures, the base, the core, the source of the flow. In us, our pelvis, and the energy that flows up from it. Last show, we met a woman named Shakti, who, as the legend goes, is stuck in the pelvis as if it were in a cage, and who desperately wants to get out and to rise up that vertical column. What else have we been looking at? Well, we've seen that invisible body intellect, haven't we? How the same things in our brain, we've always thought of them as brain functions, the things that give us thought, memory, reason, recall, logic, intelligence, all those previously accepted to be brain things, how they are in fact in every cell of our body. They permeate every cell of our body. We build everything into that invisible body intellect, and then that body intellect turns around and distills and condenses and refluxes it into us. And all of this has led us to where we are now, to our current investigation. Our current attempt to understand this invisible force that those old Indian mystics called Kundalini energy. We were looking at that and our search to find out what our friend Shakti has to do with all of it. So that's where we are today. Still continuing to look at these invisible, these very real channels through which energy flows. And we're looking at what flows through the pipes. And we're looking at the stops and the nodes and the checkpoints and the crimps and the things that either facilitate these flows or choke them off. So we've got all this latent energy in our core, stuck in us. And we know we want to get it out of there, but we want to understand the how and why of it. We got gravity making things fall down. We've got entropy falling apart. We got energy falling up, things evaporating and condensing all over the place. So with all these motions going on, sometimes things happen in ways that make it difficult for us to see or understand the connections between them. A few shows back, I told you that I was just going to throw out a bunch of information at you and that we'd start to pick it up and put it back together later. And that's what our show is about today then. Today, we're seeing what all this stuff in the core has to do with those ragadveshas we spoke about, with the attractions and repulsions, with pleasure and pain, and we're going to review all those things too. We want to understand the core itself, from where these energies start their journey and the way they flow upwards in us, and how they change on their journey. and how they change us on their journey. To understand what flows through the pipes, we need to understand the pipes themselves, but even that doesn't do us a lot of good until we understand the starting point and the starting material. So that's where we're headed off today. Plenty to do, but first, we've reached the part of our show where we all get to stop and take a deep breath, because we've arrived at the place where we get to take our virtual field trip, our journey in our mind's eye. Today is a very simple virtual journey. Today, visualize that you are helping a young child learn some geography, learn how to read a map. And the child's looking at it, and she says, "Look here. It says here that Los Angeles is only 5 inches from San Francisco. How can that be?" And you sort of laugh and reply, "Oh, no, it's not. It's much further than that. You see, the map is a scale model to show you relative distances." And so the child looks up and says, "Oh yeah? Well, is the map telling you the truth? Is the map telling us the truth, or is it lying?" And so you reply, "Well, it's telling us the truth, of course. It's a very accurate map." And then the child says, in a perplexed tone, "Well, wait, how can the map be telling us the truth if it's telling us that Los Angeles is only 5 inches away from San Francisco?" All right, hold that thought. Last show, we spoke of Shakti and Shiva. Let's review that a little bit. It's a fairy tale. Once upon a time, there was this woman named Shakti, and she had this boyfriend named Shiva, and she really wanted to see him, to be reunited with him very badly, but she was very, very far away from him. We won't go into the how and the why they were separated in the first place, but what we do want to know is that they really belong together. And we also need to know that Shiva ain't moving. And so if Shakti's going to find him, it's up to her. So in order to do that, she has to go on a journey across distance. And in order to complete that journey, she has to figure out her way how to get past a bunch of obstacles, a bunch of barriers. And so Shakti's trip, it's a little bit like a video game. In order to arrive at her destination, she needs to get through all these perils and tests. And her reward for getting past one level, just like a video game, is moving up, being promoted to a harder and more difficult level. Well, I think by now you've realized that Shakti's journey is a metaphor for what's going on in you and in your body, mind, spirit, emotion, intellect. We want to know where she is, what she's doing, why she's doing it, and what she has to do to get to where she wants to be. So that story of Shakti and Shiva, is a cornerstone story. It's the cornerstone story, in fact, of Tantra Yoga. So all of a sudden you find yourself studying Tantra. Now please remember that the word yoga means union. Only in the West is yoga an exercise class. So if your yoga class is giving you six-pack abs and buns of steel, well, you're probably in a very good exercise class, but you're probably not practicing yoga. That's not what it's about. In fact, yoga is a spiritual pursuit. It's a complex, mystical, spiritual philosophy. And its practitioners, the true yogis, were extremely mystical beings. Those ancient yogis, they were called rishis, the ancient yogic mystics. They figured out a bunch of things that Western science has only just recently begun to discover. And they figured out a lot of other things that Western science hasn't discovered yet. So you have to put that word discovered in quotes. One of the things that the rishis knew about was chakras. So when you become interested in chakras, you're practicing yoga, whether you're going to an exercise class or not. The study of chakra yoga, here's where the plot thickens, is the study of Kundalini yoga. It is a subset of Kundalini yoga, but Kundalini yoga in itself is a subset of Tantra yoga. It is the cornerstone, it's the foundation of it, in fact. And the story of Shakti and Shiva, it's a parable about what we want to do to find that yogic union and the health and growth and happiness and health and vibrance and self-realization that go with it. All of us, in a metaphoric but in a very real way, want to get the Shakti in us to wake up to break out of her pelvis cage, rise up a vertical column, and be reunited with Shiva. Yogis describe Kundalini, by the way, as her, not it. In fact, the full and correct name is Kundalini Shakti. So now you've made that connection. And Shakti flows, or not, through something called the Sushumna Nadi. We're going to review that Sushumna Nadi in a little bit. Okay, but first, I'm just throwing a few facts about Tantra to you, things that you might want to know. Tantra has a spiritual or a devotional element to it too. Now, we've already seen on Energy Contact that you do not need to be religious to make energy contact. In fact, religion leads more people away from spirituality than towards it. For most people, religion is something they practice to protect them from ever having to be spiritual. That'll fill up my email box. But devotional yogis will tell you that while most spiritual philosophies are about God the Father, Tantra is about God the Mother, the feminine aspect of the divine. And it's good to know. But more importantly about that, Tantra is about union. It's about transcending the appearance of difference in things that are actually the same. Things like ice and water and steam. Things like mass and energy. Things like body, mind, spirit, emotion. Okay, many of you have been led to believe that Tantra Yoga is about sex, but we're seeing that that's not the case at all, really. As a matter of fact, its most ardent practitioners are celibate. A little more about Tantra. The word Tantra means to weave, to expand, to spread. And the word yoga, you recall, means union. So you put them together. Therefore, Tantra Yoga means to weave and expand together, like weaving a fabric, like weaving Shakti and Shiva back together, like mapping out and bridging the space between them. So, in that sense, Tantra is very mystical. It's spooky, and it's all about power. The power to do just about anything, if you're willing to put in the time and the effort and all the hard work. All right, so Tantra is not at all what you thought it is, perhaps, but it is about that Kundalini Shakti. And Kundalini Shakti is that very sensual, snake-like energy that flows up the pipe, that writhes its way up the pipe, that is the Sushumna Nadi. At least that's what it would be doing if there weren't these things in the way called chakras, just crimping off the flow, resulting in a stoppage of it. So what Shakti's doing, or at least what she would be doing, is transcending. Her story is about how we can transcend. If we just allow her to get out of there and move onward and upward and overcome the raga dveshas and the pairs of opposites. But wait a minute. We're starting to jump ahead of ourselves a little bit. Let's regroup. Let's return to the pipeline for a moment. We're seeing that energy goes on a journey in us. It rises like steam and refines itself on the way up. And that brings us back to the topic of distillation. Let's quickly review that. Let's bring up a slide. What you're about to see on your screen here, there it is a diagram and a picture of a distillation apparatus. Or to use the common term, a still. They're the same thing there, a drawing and a picture. Now, we've looked a lot at distillation over the past few shows, and the reason we have is because it's what we're doing in our body. It's a metaphor, a homologue for Shakti's journey. Let's move right ahead to our next slide. And here we can see how the distillation units, here it comes, how the distillation units even sort of physically resemble our spine and pelvis. Can you see that? See the first two pots there in that spine and pelvis? Our main vertical and horizontal structures. But it's our pelvis, it's our core where the journey begins. On Energy Contact, we refer to our pelvis as a bowl of guts and goo, and that's an accurate description. We have seen that it's the very core of us in a lot of ways. Not only that, it's Shakti's cage. Well, you see on your screen here, the distillation pots and the spine there. All with stuff in that bottom bowl. But what's that other thing over there? Well, if you've been watching, you know that that's that Sushumna Nadi that we've mentioned. Really, the Sushumna is just a little pole in the middle, and those circles on it are chakras. I'll use another model to show you how distillation works. Let's come back up here. Here's a little subsection of my buddy Slim right here. And we're going to see that it's very much a distillation pot. We start with crude material, raw stuff down here in the bowl. but it's got good stuff in it too. And when we heat it, the good stuff rises up the column. In distillation, it's called a fractionating column. Here we're going to call it a spine. Now remember, there's no difference between the liquid in the pot and the steam that's rising up. It's the same thing in different forms. But as the steam moves up the column, the good stuff separates from the lousy stuff and it refines. So what does this have to do with my friend Shakti? Well, and most people say things like, I've tried hundreds of things, when in fact they haven't. They've tried one thing hundreds of times. If we can break Shakti out, if we can get Shakti out of there, move her up a little bit, well, then we'll start to do new things in new ways. And we'll get some new results. And then we'll evolve and we'll learn a new balance and a new equilibrium and a whole new understanding of health that will bring us growth and happiness and self-improvement and the realization of our full potential. If your Sushumna Nadi is open, Kundalini energy will take that crude potential energy in your core and it will refine and distill and purify it in you and move it upwards. Pretty cool, huh? But Kundalini energy does not flow through most people's Sushumna Nadis. If it started to, those chakras, those circles that we saw in the picture would crimp it off. But it's even worse than that because most people don't even get that far. They don't have the raw material, the starting material to start off with. Now geographically, get my spine here again, geographically, all that Shakti has to do is get from here to here, or actually up here. My model here doesn't have a head, but we do, at least some of us. Okay, so that's all we have to do. On you, that's probably about 2.5 feet, but it's a deceptive thing. It's like looking at a map and seeing Los Angeles is only 5 inches away from San Francisco. Okay, so we've seen how that energy begins in the core, falls up. We've seen a lot about that core. We've seen that it is the part of us that controls survival, breath, power, anger, fear, the fight, flight, or freeze response. All sorts of things going on in that core. This is a physical part of us that has a whole lot to do with the movement of those unseen energies that we're talking about. Spirit, emotion, things like that. And this is partly why it is so difficult to be a spiritual person until and unless we understand how to promote the flow of unseen energy through our physical structure. And this energy flow is a distillation-like energy. It's an energy purifying process and it takes us somewhere. We'll see where it's going. People talk about evolving like it's some sort of abstract thing, but really it's not. It's as simple and tangible as grade school science. And this is the chemistry and the physiology of it that we're talking about right here. So those old yogic mystics, those old rishis, they must have known a little more about chemistry and physics than we gave them credit for. All right, so now back to our journey. In order to complete it, we have to overcome all sorts of blocks and knots and obstacles. We'll see soon, that's what all the chakras have to do with. And it's about getting past barriers and all that sort of stuff. But before we can do any refining, first, we have to have the crude ore. We got to have something to refine. And then the next thing we have to do is escape that pull, that comfortable gravitational pull that is the pelvis. Okay, on my model, so you can forget about all this stuff up here right now because we haven't gotten there yet. The goal is to move that energy up the vertical column. But the vertical column is useless at this point because Shakti is stuck down at the root, down in the bottom of that bowl, in the main horizontal structure. We have to break her loose. All right, let's reset. Going fast and furious here. Shakti's journey to find her lover Shiva is a parable, and it's analogous to a road trip. And you're moving into places on your journey that you've never been before. So you better get a map. And the longest trip begins with the first step. And the first step is at the core. As long as Shakti is stuck at the root, at the bottom of that distillation bowl, she is trapped by a false perception a false perception of separation. In this place, it seems as though there's no difference, or that there is a difference, between the body, the mind, the spirit, the emotion, the intellect, and the ego. Now, Shakti knows better. She knows they're all the same. But the perception is so strong that her senses are deceiving her. So to understand those false perceptions, we have to take a minute and understand those ragadveshas, those pairs of opposites. Remember them? It is only the attraction to wealth that makes you feel the discomfort of poverty. It's the attraction to a full stomach that makes you feel the pain of hunger. It is the need for companionship or romance or acceptance that makes you feel the pain and the agony of loneliness and separation. It is your attachment to happiness that makes you sad. In fact, it is the very pursuit of happiness that leads to sadness. If the weather person says it'll be 72 and sunny tomorrow and you wake up to 55 and cloudy, you'll be sad. But if the weather person says 42 and rainy and you wake up to 55 and cloudy, you'll be happy. Why is that? Because your happiness and sadness have nothing to do with the weather. Now, those false perceptions, they are a function of the mind. And we're not going to have time to get into the mind today. But we want to know that's where they come from, and that they're strong, and that if you get trapped in them, you will find yourself locked in Shakti's cage. And it'll make you operate in an atmosphere of fear and anxiety, and you'll say things like, "Oh, I hate my job. Oh my God, I hope I don't get fired." And then you'll wonder why you get sick. Think that's bad? It gets worse, because then, trying to deal with that, you'll go to get medicated so that you won't feel the pain. The pain is still there, and the pathology that goes with it, you just won't feel it. You'll have a false perception until one day, even the chemistry of all that's overwhelmed, and entropy will take hold, and you will fall apart. All right, but on Energy Contact, we're doing better things. We are keeping it together, and we're moving forward. So, Shakti's journey, it's not geographical at all. But even so, it's still something that we're going to need to map out. It's a journey of refining, of purifying. It's about balance and equilibrium. And we're going to get to all of that. It's a continual series of evaporating up and condensing downs that's homologous to the refining process, which is an analogy for understanding Kundalini energy, which is a metaphor for understanding the key to your health, growth, happiness, self-improvement, and the realizing of your full potential. And that's all for today. For now, we're out of time. I'll see you next time, and until then, I wish you peace and positive energy and a healthy life and Energy Contact.
He ain't gonna worry and I ain't gonna complain. I'm gonna